Yeah, I've been I've been listening to the Joe Rogan podcast with Alex Jones today. I'm almost done with it. It's
I heard a little bit about that.
huh?
Where he's like giving him much. But I heard a little bit about that, like something about it, where he was giving him much of pushback
Yeah,
when he was talking about some stuff.
yeah, it's been interesting. Like Alex Jones has a lot of really crazy stuff. Like he's got a conspiracy theory for everything. So, and
Right. It's one of those things where like he's bound to hit one eventually, and I feel like people take that eventually one, or they take like, oh, this there's like a very vague thing that happened that's true, right? Like he'll say like some crazy thing, and they'll be like one slight part of it's true, and then it's like, oh my god, he's a
oh yeah, we forgot to start the episode with not to get political, but
and not to get political.
but yeah,
Huh? Political or anything, but
but yeah, it's interesting because there are some things that he says that are kind of leaning towards sane. So this is an interesting interview because, like, you know, he's not 100% crazy.
right. Well, he's not like on his show, right? Like on the show he like actually did for himself.
Yeah.
I assume he still does it. Like he's like balls to the walls crazy, right? Like he's just
Infowars.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So
About like interdimensional demons in the core of the earth or something, like some crazy like.
yeah.
But
So like. So he has this very interesting stance on climate change. He does not deny that the Earth is, billions of years old and that we have ice ages and all that stuff, which is very surprising to me because I always thought of him as, kind of right-wing pandering towards Christians. But so like he doesn't deny all that, and he's like completely leaning into the fact that we need more carbon dioxide. So he's like, yeah, bring it on. Let's change the climate. It's such a weird stance.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone that like was like super conspiracy nut and then also like it's like, yeah, save the environment. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think he denies that like global temperatures rise. He doesn't deny that the global temperatures are rising, but he does deny that global temperatures rising would have any kind of like negative impact on humanity, which that's where it becomes problematic because.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, we're talking about someone like him. I mean, it's kind of like,
yeah,
like take anything you can get, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. He definitely downplayed coronavirus, and then Joe Rogan fact-checked him on that. Joe Rogan fact-checked him a lot. Alex Jones believes that the transhuman movement is seeking to like actively kill humans and replace them with machines, which I think is completely wrong. I think the goal is that as technology advances and AI advances, it would behoove us to merge with machines so that we're not left behind. But
yeah,
that's a complicated topic too.
Yeah, I mean actually, I wouldn't mind doing one on that. Like
for sure.
The next one, like a philosophical of like, the ideas of like augmented, biology or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really interesting topic.
I'm in many topics.
Well, we might as well talk about it then. Like, what's your stance on that? Like an eventual future where we keep replacing biological parts of us, maybe even our brain someday.
I'm 100% down with most of it. The brain is a little sketchy to me because like you run into so this is like a similar problem you can make in the hypothetical of like teleportation.
Yep.
Like, does that kill the original person and just make a copy of them?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense, or like is the original person dead, or are they still there? Type thing, right? And kind of a similar thing with like doing like, like say augmenting the brain. Like, how much do you mess with it? Because the brain is who you are. like completely, like because you can change your body, you can change whatever, like the personality, like that's you, and that's you change obviously day to day,
Yeah.
week to week, and it's more noticeable as we go.
Yeah.
Like the brain is, for all intents and purposes, is who you specifically are, right? So like it gets a little sketchy for me on that end, but not because I think there's anything wrong with like it. It's just more so in the sense of like
You wouldn't want
it's
to.
gonna like
Yeah.
what's the probability on this,
Yeah.
right?
You wouldn't want to
'Cause if
lose
you
your
mess up on the
consciousness,
arm-
right?
Yeah. So like if you messed up on the arm part, like you just replace the arm, right? It's not the brain's not exactly one you could do as easily on that.
So I'm not super well versed in the physiology of the brain, but from what I understand, it is possible for the brain to grow new neurons.
Yeah.
I think there was a recent study that showed that people recovering from depression and post-traumatic stress disorder do in fact grow new cells. And like if you have atrophy of the hippocampus, which like let's say heavy marijuana use or depression, like that atrophy can be reversed. So like my thoughts on transferring your consciousness to a digital brain or a virtual brain would be if you did it gradually enough to where your consciousness is spread across, let's say, a subset of original neurons and then an ever-growing subset of new virtual neurons. I wonder if that would be enough to where the transfer of your consciousness is seamless, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like where it works well enough to where you're still at least relatively the same person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, and this is relevant to the idea you just discussed. So like, obviously, I've mentioned before the what I studied in college. What I have a bachelor's in is psychology, and so one of it is in terms of the brain, because I studied more like cognition, memory, sensory perception. Like the smell, taste, yada yada, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of the brain, because there's brain plasticity, right? And that's what's like causing like the different like more neurons, and then like the way, more specifically, a lot of times the way the neurons are linked up. That changes quite a bit as you grow older, and the idea is that as you're younger, like there's more plasticity. That's why like if you get an injury when you're younger, you can kind of get over it more, because then your brain like makes new sections and stuff. Like it uses other sections of the brain that aren't damaged to like do the things that the damaged part can't do anymore.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the brain activity, like in a lot of different areas of the brain. There's more like a lot of them have centralized areas, but like this is where like the majority of the stuff happens. Like it's spread across like on a lot of them.
So as you get older, does it just become more difficult for you to form new connections between the neurons? Like I believe the term is action potential or something like that.
Yeah, well, because the connections become more refined, like as you get older. So yeah, there's a little bit less leeway. It's kind of, I guess, it's probably a similar thing with like stem cells, right? Because I mean, with the body in general, right? The more like your cells are reproducing and stuff, like the less efficient it is, right? It starts breaking down, like you start getting like, especially when you get old enough, it starts having a chance for like more defects in terms of the replication process, because it's replicated so much.
And I'm
what?
And I'm guessing. Well, is there a way to reverse that, or at least slow it down? I'm guessing there are certain things you can do to kind of reduce the aging process, like reduce overall stress levels,
So aging, a lot of what aging ends up being is there's this thing called, and if I had my book in front of me right now, maybe because I don't want to. This is off of memory, so
yeah, for sure,
a little bit off. So I just want to point that out for anyone that listens to this.
Yep.
Be like, oh, you used the slightly wrong word or something like that.
Yep.
But if I remember correctly, it's these things in your cells called telomeres.
Yep.
And what happens is the more they replicate, like the more your cells replicate, the more this telomere thing shrinks. Uh, and eventually, like when it reaches, like when it's like reaches like the end of it or whatever, right?
Mm.
Is the idea of like like you end up dying because there's not enough. Because I'm not 100% sure like what specifically it does. I know
So
that's been linked pretty heavily with death because ideally, there's nothing specifically in our body that's like, oh, we need to die, right? Like a lot of it's just like it keeps going and going and going, and like a computer, right? Like the parts stop working eventually
yeah.
because it's a flawed system. But there's something that's like in your brain that's like, okay, you need to die now, switch. Like,
So what exactly causes the telomeres to shrink in size? Is it basically kind of accumulation of like cell replication mistakes? Or so I may be confusing that concept with the concept of like radiation damage on genes. So I may be mixing those concepts up.
I don't know much about radiation, so I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do anything with it. Unfortunately. Although that does interest me, I should probably start looking into that.
But yeah, back to
just
transhumanism, I guess.
Yeah, so when you say transhumanism, you just mean like the mechanical, like the computer and like augmentation type stuff specifically?
Yeah, basically. Like just using technology to improve, humans in general. Which is obviously a spectrum from like we have a cell phone, so now we have a bunch of information readily available that we didn't have 50 years ago versus
for an addendum to the previous thing, because I went to go look it up, assuming this website's accurate with it, and it sounds accurate to me because it sounds like stuff I had read previously.
Yep.
The idea is, so the telomeres are on the chromosomes.
Mm-hmm.
They're what keep the chromosomes like together, and the idea is that there's an enzyme on them that like most cells don't have this enzyme, and so like they shorten as they keep replicating the chromosomes. And so the idea.
I wonder if that enzyme could be kind of like artificially
replicated,
added into the body. That's probably a huge oversimplification. But I do know that they're doing tons of research into telomeres. So
yeah, be cool. I wonder how. Okay, yeah. Some experts believe oxidative stress can also shorten them. Because I mean, we know plenty of the what stress does to the body, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm. Could you define oxidative in this context?
Let's see if this thing specifically. Okay, let's see. Refers to an imbalance between the systemic reactive oxygen, whatever.
Yeah, that's getting too biological for me.
yeah, I'm trying to. All right, yeah.
Huh.
All right, screw that.
But
because I want to keep it more, not like, because I mean, I could read some of those, but like,
lots of terms to break down. Yep.
Yeah.
Huh.
But
But in general, what are examples of things that cause oxidative stress?
I'm trying to, because the term doesn't, like, I read it off that particular website that was defining the thing. I can't say that I've seen that term pop up specifically.
Okay.
I mean, I know what oxidative in general, in the sense of like an imbalance of like oxygen, and like its ability to detoxify or something. it kind of goes more into the biology than it does the psychology. So that's a little bit.
So this,
Like I took some biology stuff.
okay, so this isn't something that's like directly linked to behavior changes that a human could do. It's maybe indirectly related.
Well, perhaps, yeah.
But yeah,
Because a lot of it's talking about like how like oxygen reacts in terms of like your body and repairing damage. So it might be in terms of like more specific like injuries,
yeah,
like as opposed to say as opposed to something like say like distress that we think of, which is more mental.
yeah.
Generally speaking.
Yep.
You know, I would. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I've been like working directly on, kind of reducing in my life. So yeah, I think my stance on death and kind of immortality is, I think I would have a major FOMO about missing out on future technology and where the human race goes in like hundreds of years. So that's my motivation for being really interested in these kinds of ideas. I want to prolong my life through technology if I can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of death at all.
Yeah.
I'm not like. It's when I think about the idea of not existing, like specifically when I think about what it would be like to do that.
Yeah.
Like my brain is trying to think in that mode. Like I start having like existential like just dread, just like it hits me like a truck, man. Like it's brutal.
Yeah. I think
I'm not cool.
Good.
So I would very much be down to like improve our health, like as much as we can.
Yeah.
And if it's through like mechanical means, whatever. I
don't necessarily feel dread about death, but I think I have the perspective that it would suck to die, because then that's that's it. There's no more. So
yeah, well that's my thing, because I kind of like, out of all the things I probably value, I value the ability to think the most, just being conscious in general.
Yeah.
Just the idea of like, no more, you can't do that, like, because the thing is, right, like if you die and like there's nothing else, at the very least when I'm dead, like I don't have to worry about it, like there's something there, it's like whatever.
Yep.
But like current version of me is not the conscious version of me is like, hey, let's not destroy the thing that makes you, like that'd be
Yeah,
because I don't, and I you don't either, since we're having the conversation the way we are. I imagine you're not one that believes in an afterlife. I know I don't specifically. But.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm open to the possibility.
Yes,
but like nowadays, and this might come across as crazy, but nowadays I'm leaning more towards the possibility that this is a simulation rather than something overseen by a deity. But at the end of the day, I don't see much of a practical difference between those two.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on the simulation. I guess it depends on like, well, what happens when the simulation ends, right?
Yeah.
Like if that were, so then you kind of run into the same problem, right? Whether it's a simulation or not.
Yeah. But if we're in a simulation and our consciousness is simulated, then I feel like that kind of, I don't know, that kind of
well, the one thing I think you can say this in terms of like, because there's the old proverb of I think therefore I know, or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the general idea of like, or what is it? The only thing, I should look it up, but the idea is that basically like I know that like I'm a like thinking person, like that's the only like true thing I can take, like I'm a thinking like entity, I exist.
Yep.
Right.
There's
Because even like, because yeah, theoretically, I have no idea. Like, even if I were to meet you in person, I don't know, like, if you were just a figment of my imagination. But like, I know that I exist, and you know that you exist in some sort of form, like shape or form or whatever. Right?
Yep, and you are describing the philosophical idea of solipsism,
Yeah.
which is a really
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, it's about the best you can do when it comes to this stuff, right? It's kind of because once you start getting like really like theoretical with some of this stuff, I mean, because like I can sit there and be like, okay, maybe this particular like I can sit there and be like, okay, maybe like the Roman gods aren't exactly accurate.
Yeah.
Least of all because they're literally just stolen from the Greeks. But you know, whatever. I digress. like, I mean, you can do that with certain ones, but just the overall concept of it, like, yeah, I don't know. Because I have like even with, and I guess I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this idea. But my idea is like much more recently over the past few years has been like even if there is a god, I don't think there's an afterlife because I think that your consciousness is tied specifically to your brain, and we know your brain dies when you die, like eventually, right?
Yeah.
So I think that even if there's like some soul thing or something, right? I don't think it would necessarily matter because you wouldn't really get to experience it. Like maybe in some weird, vague way you would, but you specifically as you would not get to experience because your brain is dead.
Yep.
So even if there was an afterlife, I don't like. It seems pretty pointless to me in that context.
Yep. I'm definitely in the camp of consciousness is, strictly a manifestation of your brain. So it's all tied to something physical, measurable. I think the one exception to that afterlife hypothesis is if the God that's overseeing us is maybe some advanced alien race, which we're really getting into sci-fi. They could have a technology in place that kind of snapshots our consciousness right before we die and then transfers it to an afterlife. So that's definitely something I see as plausible.
Yeah, I mean, because when you start talking about when you start getting into this stuff, you're talking about like people with the ability, or like creatures, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, that have the ability to potentially have the ability to like do anything, So I mean, it's something like that's certainly possible.
I think
because we're always going to run into the problem that we're always limited by like what we know now. Right?
Yep.
So like, there's only so much we can, try to theorize, because it's like, what's going to be like 1,000 years? There's going to be so much primitive stuff that we thought it's just going to be like, assuming that our species doesn't wipe each other off the planet or something, right?
Yep, or we don't have another societal collapse like ancient Rome or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're probably too late for that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, well, the world's connected so well that I don't see that happening unless there's like some big say internet or something gets knocked out because there's just a bunch of crazy fighting or bombs go off. You'd have to go I feel really crazy.
Or mass coronal ejection.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of another thing, which is a few billion years from now, due to the way the universe is expanding, it's very possible that if we lose the information we have now and start from scratch, then people will have a very different view of the universe because they won't be able to see distant galaxies, and that might limit understanding of the Big Bang and stuff like that. It would be...
Yeah, I wonder. It'd be weird because it's because you're talking about stuff that's it'd be so far removed from us.
Yeah.
And they'd look back and they'd be stuff isn't the way that it is with us. And unless they had more concrete proof, I mean, it's kind of hard to be this for sure happened. I mean, it'd basically be a little bit more than a fairy tale at that point.
Yeah.
It's oh, well, the universe isn't like this anymore. So it's just a story and it's damn, dude.
we could actually be in a situation like that now, where we have limited information and are missing a big portion of...
Yeah, because you can see some of the I think that's actually true because you can see some of the technological advancements of like a lot of the lost civilizations, like Mayan type stuff, for example. And like you can tell, like, maybe it's still primitive by the standards we have today, but like, they were doing stuff. Like, they weren't just sitting around like being completely content with their society. Like they were definitely going forward.
Yep. And now we've lost the ability to make vibranium. But no. No.
Yeah, we kind of got lost in time. No, but because you'll look at something like, say, like, what is it? Is it in the Arab world? What math system was created? Was it algebra?
Yeah, that's from the golden age of Islam, algebra.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean, right? There's like so many, like every area is kind of like reaches its kind of golden age eventually to that point that like I can't imagine that with all these things around the world, like there weren't people, all over the place discovering all sorts of crazy things, and then eventually if their society gets lost or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Lost the time.
It's really interesting to think about how like the exponential growth in our advancement of technology right now, where that will put us in just a few decades. Like Moore's law is definitely slowing down, but I mean, we're kind of overcoming that by kind of focusing more on distributed computing and doing things at the data center level instead of a single computer. So like there's definitely ways to solve for the fact that Moore's law is preventing us from squeezing even more stuff into a personal computer. Eventually we could have a whole planet that's a computer or something. I don't know.
Yeah. What is would you be able to define Moore's law?
Yeah.
I don't know that.
So Moore's law, and I might get the numbers slightly wrong, but the general idea is that that the number of transistors you can fit in the same amount of space on a circuit board doubles every 18 months. And so there's graphs, if you look at the Wikipedia article, that shows that this is fairly consistent ever since the 70s or even before that. It's starting to kind of plateau a bit right now, but I mean we're running into the point where 5 nanometer technology and things below that, you have kind of interference on the quantum level, and so you can't squeeze more transistors in the same amount of space without having huge issues related to interference. So that's one reason why things are slowing down, and also like all this additional power means that you have more heat per square inch or whatever measurement you want to use.
All right, that's kind of cool.
But yeah, that's just my computer science degree speaking. Since you were sharing your psychology degree stuff.
I was gonna say, yeah, I sat there and did my spiel from so might as well do your own.
Yep. Yeah, but I mean, like we're like AI right now is advancing so much. I don't know if you've heard of GPT-3. So
actually, I've form pop up a couple times here or there. I haven't actually looked into it though, like at all. So.
Yeah. So OpenAI is another company that Elon Musk founded. And the goal of OpenAI is to kind of develop the field of artificial intelligence. And so they came up with this language model called GPT. And GPT-2 was kind of in the news a few years ago because it was getting so good that they wanted to limit access to it because they were able to come up with articles that were like deceivingly good.
I think I remember you mentioning a little bit something about that. Because I think, like, I remember at some point having a conversation with you, because like that was part of the. Because I remember talking about the perception thing about like how AI can, like, how well they can perceive like objects and stuff.
Yep.
So I feel like you probably mentioned this topic to me at that point. Where I remember it from.
Maybe I think so.
Yeah. Anyway,
but yeah,
there. It was just.
But yeah, there, I forget what's being graphed, but there is a graph that kind of visualizes the effectiveness of this language model, and I think they were expecting it to not continue to, grow linearly, but like even with GPT-3, that graph is still growing linearly, meaning that we still haven't reached the limits of this model. And so like this is something that has to run at scale, like across a bunch of different servers in order to be effective. But like the more you're able to scale it, like the more servers you can involve in the process, the more effective it gets. And so approaching the limits. Oh, go ahead.
With the way AI works, the way with the what I messed up there. With the way the AI works, as far as I'm aware, it would make sense that language they would absolutely dominate in. Yeah, because usually like visual, like it's more the abstract like perceptions that they have really trouble with, visual, audio, stuff like that. But like in terms of like writing, like text, like of course they're gonna kick our ass, dude. Like it's not even gonna be a con. Because that reminds me of that. Was it like Clever Bot and like replications of that, where it's like, man, those like, I mean, they at least come across as like real people. Like, I mean, you can like get them to like certain parts where they're weird or whatever, right? But they come across good enough. So like, the more they work on it, like, of course you're gonna be reaching crazy stuff, or they can write full articles. And you see them like, here's like they take all the Harry Potter scripts and they write a like a whole chapter of it. And it sounds like a garbled mess, but the more and more you like refine that, it's like, absolutely, they'd be able to like type anything. Yeah.
So I watched this really good video by a YouTube channel called Computer File about GPT-3. So some of the claims that I'm making are from that video, summarized in that video. But I believe they presented a poem from a Oh yeah, the description. Yeah. They presented a poem from an author, and then they presented a poem that GPT-3 came up with to resemble that author's poem or writing style. And at the upper limits of GPT-3, it fooled test subjects into believing that it was from the real author around 50% of the time, which I would say is fairly substantial, because that's all part of what's called the Turing test, which is a test you would apply to artificial intelligence to determine if it can fool you into thinking it's a human. So that's like the golden that's like the holy grail of AI, and we're getting pretty close to it.
Yeah.
And what's kind of funny is if you have it do arithmetic problems, it's a language model, but it can actually do some basic arithmetic. It's not very good at it, but it's getting better and better with each generation of the language model. And so like it really starts to struggle around a 10-digit addition. But what's interesting is it's figuring out how to do addition from scratch. So it's figuring out how to do math, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's weird. So they wouldn't be able to, because the whole point is just letting it like figure it out itself. Like you obviously you wouldn't be able to like implement the math. Like
so they train the model by letting it just look at a bunch of information on the internet, and they specifically remove any data sets that contain like addition tables or something.
Yeah.
But AI is going to be really interesting in the next 20 years, I think. Leading up to the singularity where they take over, but which I'm pretty sure is a very plausible thing that might happen.
Yeah, well, it's one of those. We get who's gonna oil them, right? We got to be around for the manual labor.
Yeah. And then we'll be their batteries, and then it'll just the Matrix will become a documentary.
But I don't know, like
Go ahead.
Ignoring the horrible outside world, the inside world of the Matrix seemed like it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You know, you know,
So I think.
there's
Go ahead.
worse ways to go.
Yeah. So I think there's three existential threats this century that might get us. The first being like an artificial superintelligence, which people project would happen around 2050. The second being, and this probably wouldn't kill us off completely, but it would definitely kill billions, is climate change. Like if certain highly populated regions, like let's say China becomes virtually uninhabitable, then they have to migrate somewhere. Like let's say Russia or Australia or something. There's going to be a lot of people dying. So that's an existential threat. And then I think the third existential threat is we're bringing this full circle back to the Alex Jones thing. Is I think the political division that we have right now is just going to keep getting worse.
The water to turn the frogs gay.
They actually referenced that meme on the podcast episode.
Yeah. It's funny about that, like not to take away from the discussion, but it's like, I mean, it is funny to take that, and it was blown up, but he actually wasn't like super far off on that particular one, like of what he was talking about. It was like there was it was a chemical turning, like where the frog changed sex, so that it could like mate or something with like another some weird shit like that. I don't know if it was actually a chemical being put in the water or if it was chemical in the frog. Just in general, because I know some species can change like sex if need be, like
to
populate.
Yeah, I think amphibians do that, right? They can like reproduce without a mate, even. I know some species can do that. I don't remember which ones. So there's actually some truth to it. The turning the frogs.
Yeah, there was a. Like, yeah, it had nothing to do with like sexual or like orientation.
Yeah,
and I'm not 100%. Like it's been a while since I looked into it, so I don't know. I don't know if they were like if chemicals were being dumped into the water or if it was like just chemicals in the frog, like like biological, because that would make a big difference too, right? But
so
it was just he said it was just like hysterical.
So did it actually change the frog's sex organs, or it just changed their sexual orientation?
No. Well, because animals don't really have sexual orientation that much. I mean, you could argue some like exhibit like homosexual tendencies, right?
Yeah.
Like you'll have like, but in terms like they don't really have a identity in terms of like sexual orientation, so it's hard to. Because there's some, I think they'll just have sex with anything.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So,
it's kind of hard.
So like that kind of supports a hypothesis that sexual orientation could be a social construct in itself. I wonder.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's something that.
I'm all down for next episode if you want to jump into that stuff. One of the things I did in the community college, like I did probably like 5 or 6 women's studies courses, and I'm sure people comments would be like, "Oh wow, that's cringe," and some of it was cringe. I'll give you that. But there's quite a bit of stuff there.
Yeah, that would be an interesting topic.
Is really sociologically based. Like there's absolutely no argument that a lot of it isn't. Anything revolving gender, it blatantly is.
Yeah.
Even if some of them have like underpinnings of biology, right?
Yeah.
The idea of like men should be strong. Like, okay, yeah, there might be the biological pinning that like a male is on average stronger because of muscles and testosterone. But in terms of like you need to be this, like that all that is always going to be sociological.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting discussion. I
was like one class from getting a certificate in that, and because the problem was it was a class I had to go in person to because I did I did my stuff online because I couldn't drive there. It's too far away.
Oh, that sucks one away.
I was like, I don't know. I one of these times I'll be curious to see like if even though I already graduated, if I could be like, hey, can I like go back and do this one
Non-traditional
course?
student.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I don't know now, but it'd be worth looking into at some point.
yeah. I think
Like
I
I
was.
would even do one.
Yeah, I think I was like 2 math classes away from a math minor. So, but I mean, there's a lot of overlap with computer science.
Dude, so okay, so was it that you just didn't choose it properly by the time you needed it, or was it that you didn't want to?
I intentionally didn't go that route. Like once I got to like calculus 3 and stuff like that, like that's where I'm like, you know, I don't really enjoy it that much. So
I feel like, man, I didn't do a sociology. I mean, my minor is a sociology minor. It's a type of sociology minor, but it wasn't specifically just sociology. And the reason I didn't do that is because you had to do a statistics class, right? And I had already done like a statistics class for psychology, so it's like I was like, I do not want to do like a whole another one. So I did at-risk youth, which is like more, and I wouldn't mind getting into stuff like that actually at some point too.
yeah.
Like in terms of like criminal justice system and all that, you know, the laws and drugs and all that.
I'm really interested in social sciences. Like this is all really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, oh man, it's so, because it's like who we are, right? Like to me, it's useful in every, you know, maybe not specific subjects aren't, but the overall process itself is useful in like everything, absolutely everything. It's always something like math, like and biology and stuff, but like something like psychology and sociology, which is just like psychology on like society scale, pretty much.
Yeah. Not to get political, but I would love a future where we're all on UBI and we can just go get philosophy degrees or whatever.
100%, man. Like the more like as people are more educated in like all these different subjects, they're gonna be able to like be more creative with like the ways we move forward in the world.
Yep. I agree there.
Yeah, because like I get the thing of like, okay, some people are gonna be lazy, and I feel like that's true to an extent, but it's like I don't know, like as long as we're only giving them like enough to like get by, like they don't need to live with like a lavish lifestyle, but like enough to. Like I don't think someone should die just because they're being lazy.
Yeah. Have you heard of Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, I used to watch quite a bit of his stuff. He so I have a bit of a problem with some of it because
me too.
He's very much into, and it is it is somewhat a valid field of psychology, but it's very to me it's a lot more hypothetical. Mm-hmm. He follows Jung's, like the Jungian psychology type stuff, where a lot of it's
or Jung
allegory. Jung, it might be pronounced Jung. Jung.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never actually heard it pronounced out loud. So
that's how he pronounces it. So that's what I guess, but I have no idea other than that. So
yeah. I'd probably defer to that then because he's the one that likes the dude so much. So I would assume that he probably has a good idea of how it's pronounced.
Yeah,
and it could be different, like differences between like different pronunciations depending on where you like maybe in his country it's pronounced specifically like that as opposed to like maybe our country where we'd kind of look at it differently.
We could definitely save that for next time. Like I think that would go really well with the gender studies and women's studies discussion.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. Yeah, because otherwise we're just gonna keep going.
Yeah, we're at 40 minutes now.
No need to put all our eggs in one basket type of thing, right?
Yeah. Definitely wanted to mention that his name for keywords for the YouTube algorithm though. So.
Yeah, I feel like we've added enough to the discussion that we could play a little YouTube game.
But I definitely have. I like a lot of Jordan Peterson's kind of ideas, but then there's also the side of me that's a lot more liberal, and I have problems with some of his arguments. But I think it's definitely a good thing to kind of have this have this kind of middle ground when you examine someone's viewpoints, where you can kind of see both sides and make up your own mind.
I think a lot of like, because especially like in the field of psychology that he studies, he's he's pretty good at that. But I think when he starts getting into a lot more like theoretical side of stuff, like he'll do it with like religion too. And I'm trying to save it because I don't want to go like too much into it.
Yeah.
But the time. But yeah, that's where it starts losing me. Yeah, I've definitely watched quite a bit of his stuff.
Yeah.
I did what probably everyone on YouTube did at a point. Like I grew up watching like Jordan Peterson owns Kathy Newman, right? Like Ben Shapiro, whatever. I definitely I had a phase where I definitely did some of those.
Yeah, that's like super sensationalist in my opinion. I mean, it was a thing, but it's whatever. But yeah, I'm really happy to discuss this in the next video for sure.
Right. Before we leave off, though, I'm not going to say as a like discuss the topic, but I am curious if you would want to discuss this topic either on the next episode or an episode after. There's one because I took a philosophy class, right? And I know I'm fancy, right? And like not whatever, big deal, but yeah, I like the subject a lot.
Yeah,
and I should have took more classes, but there was one very particular discussion in that class, and I'd be curious if you'd want to like talk about it at some point, like in one of the other episodes, is the idea of like dolphins and whether or not they would count under the philosophical idea of like are they people?
Yeah,
like not human beings, but like the concept of like what a person is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
man, I love that discussion.
I guess elephants would be close too, right? Kind of.
Yeah, I was thinking like pigs kind of start getting pretty close to that territory. Ish, like in terms of like smart, like because a lot of it, like you need a very specific. I mean, there's a couple different things. But let's save that for like another time.
Yeah, for sure.
That's just like that's.
And now I feel bad for mostly switching from beef to pork because I was switching away from beef to save the environment a little bit.
You know what? We can save the meat discussion too, but like I'm very much like who gives a shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck you, Peter. No.
Oh yeah. That's
no.
Okay, those two can be discussed at the same time. In whatever episode.
But yeah, no.
We're gonna have to start. I'm gonna like when we listen back to this, I'm gonna write down a bunch of these ideas because I don't want to lose them.
Yeah, I think this is really great. Like this could be a series right here.
Okay, so if anyone's watched this far, this is pretty much the pilot of he and I talking just various political things. I know, and we could probably get other people in too, right? Like a mix up. It's just the political side of things, since we don't really get political in the as much on the Holy Twitter cast.
And not to get political, but smash that like button and hit the subscribe and the notification bell.
Yeah. Not to get political, but if you actually end up watching this, hey, you should recommend stuff we should talk about, and then maybe we'll do it.
Yep, for sure.
Or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, all right, and yeah, I think that's good.
Cool. All right, we are done.
Nice.